Hello, Coach Holmes here, and today we're going to be talking about the pairs of angles and the different types of pair angles. So the first one we're going to talk about is complementary angles. You guys probably heard this one before, but it's basically two angles form 90 degrees. Okay, so any two angles that when added together makes 90 degrees or a right angle, that's a complementary angle. Supplementary is very similar to it, except there's one big difference. Two angles form 180 degrees. Okay, so instead of making a right angle, it basically makes a straight angle or 180 degree angle. So that's one thing to be aware of. Now, linear pair is adjacent angles, and we'll talk about what adjacent angles are in a minute, that form from a line and ray. So for example, this will be an example of a linear pair. Okay? Notice how this ray right here, this is what we call an adjacent angle, where they share the same ray. Okay? It forms 180 degrees for both, which basically, we can basically say that all linear pairs are supplementary angles, but one thing that's significant too is that supplementary can be split into two different angles. Linear pair is basically two angles in one. Now a vertical angle is a pair of opposite angles form, I don't like how I wrote it, formed by two lines that intersects. So for example, if I draw two lines like this, opposite angles right here are going to be equal to each other. Now notice how I actually put a little curve here. Anytime you put a curve, that tells you that the angles are the same. Now if there are two curves, it's just another pair of congruent angles. Okay? So like showing you like this, that tells me that both angles are equal to each other. Now, I mentioned what an adjacent angle is, but it's basically two angles that share the same ray. Okay? So anytime you have something like this, where they have a common ray right here, that's an adjacent angle. So I have one pair, two pair, so I have one angle right here, a second angle right here, but they give me one big angle, and they share a common ray. Okay? So that's an example of an adjacent angle. Now, next thing we're going to talk about is identifying them, as far as being able to look at this and say, well, there's a right angle, there's a complementary angle, there's a supplementary angle, so on and so forth. So one sample of a pair of complementary angles is angle CGD and angle DGE. Because if I add these two angles together, that gives me 90 degrees. just by looking at it, I'm just going to assume that this is a right angle. This is the one case, okay? Now, supplementary angles, now there's more than one complementary angle, and I'm just saying that this will be 90 degrees right there, okay? So just assume that's 90 degrees. Another pair of supplementary angles, a pair of supplementary angles would be angle A, G, B, and angle B, G, E. Okay? Now, there's actually a second pair. If I can do AGD and DGE. So that's another pair, but I'm just going to show one for right now. That's just one example, but there are plenty of others. Now, another pair of linear pair, we can say the same thing. We can say the same thing as AGB and BGE, but I want to do something a little bit different. I want to say no, I'm sorry. I don't want to throw you off. AGD and angle DGE. I don't like how I write that E. Okay? So AGD, DGE will be one sample of linear pairs. Because notice how I got this line right here, and I got a ray extended. And they both share a common ray. So that makes it adjacent. Now, as far as vertical angles, now this is where we have two lines that cross. So I have line BF right here and AE. So one pair of vertical angles would be BGA, and the opposite of that angle would be angle EGF. Okay? Now, another pair, and it's coming from the same line, would be AGF and EGB. So even the bigger angles will be congruent to one another. But those are the only two pair of vertical angles that we have, okay? Those are the only two pairs that we have. We can't make any more. Now, one pair of adjacent angles. So look at this. I want to say angle BGC and angle CGD. So if I'm looking at these two angles right here, which, if you think about it, ray GC is what they have in common, okay? So ray GC is the one common ray that they have amongst this angle. Now we can find plenty of other adjacent angles, but I just want to label these two for right now, especially something that is not complementary nor supplementary, okay? Now, more often than not, you guys are going to be solving equations. You're going to be having to solve or find angles that are complementary and supplementary. Okay? So let's look at this one right here. Complementary, let's say you have two pairs of complementary angles. One angle is 2x plus 6, and the second one is x minus 12. Well, I know that two pairs of complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. So I can say 2x plus 6 plus x minus 12. Because I know these two pairs add up to 90. So when I set it up like this, I'm going to combine my x's. So 2x plus x gives me 3x. 6 minus 12 gives me negative 6 equals 90. So I just got to solve for x. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. The 6 cancels out, so I'm left with 3x equals 90 plus 6 is 96. Now, if I divide by 3 to both sides, I get x equals 32. Okay? Now, in order to solve, in order to find the angles, I found x, but I gotta find the angles. So remember, I'm gonna take 2x plus 6 real quick. Remember, I'm replacing the x with 32. I'm gonna add, and then multiply by 2, that gives me 64, plus 6 gives me 70 degrees. So one of my angles is 70 degrees. Now, I know I taught y'all I did teach y'all that you can replace this x with 32 and then subtract it from 12. But what if I go ahead and subtract the 70 from 90? Because remember, 2 parts of an angle gives me 1 whole angle. Or 1 whole angle minus 1 part of the angle gives me the second. So 90 minus 70 equals 20 degrees. So this is another way that you could find the second angle. If you already found the first angle, just subtract it from the big angle to get your second. And if you guys don't believe me, okay, that's fine. So x minus 12. Remember, I'll replace the x with 32 minus 12. 32 minus 12 will give me 20 degrees. So either way, it does work out. But that's just one way that you can do it. You don't have to do it this way, and you don't have to do it the way I just showed you. Just pick one way, stick with it. Pick the one that makes the most sense to you. Now, right here we have supplementary angles. I'm going to rewrite this real quick. I'm going to rewrite the 120 real quick. Okay. Now, we have a supplementary angle. Angle 1 is 126. We just got to find angle 2. Well, we know supplementary equals to 180. So if I have 1 part, I just got to subtract the difference. So if I subtract 180 from 126, I'm going to get 54 degrees. And that's going to give me angle 2. So you do have to know the different types of describing angles, the different pairs of angles. And we'll dig more into that later on. But the biggest thing I want y'all to understand is how do we find supplementary and complementary angles. That's the biggest thing I want y'all to worry about right now, is just be able to find the complementary and supplementary angles into parts. Find parts of the supplementary and complementary angles. Thank you. Have a good day.